like cranking on her stomach, pushing down, like he had his elbow trying to just force Big Chug out. But he was stuck. He wouldn't go, and he's breached, right? So his like legs are out essentially, and that's it. But now he's in the birth canal. His head gets stuck because then his head is big. So now he's being suffocated. So the other doctor comes. They couldn't get him out. They had to cut her down there to try to get him out. Still wouldn't happen. Literally with scissors. They then had to push him back up. Then do the cesarean and pull him out. His heart stopped. He couldn't breathe for 2 minutes. He flatlined. Like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, and tell a friend. Hit that like button right now if you can. That helps the channel the most. DJ Hamp Stampede, I'm in the building. Racism in healthcare is something we have to deal with. Reese Waters and Troubles Waters. Salute to the subscriber. Salute to Callie Beth who sent me this video specifically. I took a quick glance at it. It's interesting enough that we must talk about it. Let's see what Reese got to say. Let's see what the story's got to say. Let's see what I can add to the conversation. Hit that like button right now if you can. That helps the channel the most. All right, let's do it.
You're telling me you had a nurse that you knew was harming newborn, like neonatal infants, and you put her back on the floor? I hope these families sue fucking everybody. I hope you sue everybody. And you know, I used to get really defensive when people would say that nursing is the equivalent of cops for white ladies, but I get it now.
That's Nurse Lex, and she's talking about 26-year-old Erin Stropman, a white nurse in Henrico County, Richmond, Virginia, who was arrested for intentionally breaking the bones of 7 black babies in the NICU. And what Lex said at the end of this video...
Intentionally breaking the bones of 7 black babies in the NICU, and they put her back on the floor. So the NICU is intensive care unit for infants. So often if they are born prematurely, if they're born with some type of deficiency, or if they're born under duress or trauma, if twins specifically, because twins are considered high risk in themselves, you'll see twins be sent to a NICU. I have 2 sets of twins, so I have a decent amount of experience with the NICU itself, especially given like how my son was born, and then when they're born, you know, a little bit prematurely. Twins generally don't make it to full term. A lot of babies actually don't make it to 40 weeks, you know, but twins are born even earlier, which means they're often kept in the NICU just to get to that developmental stage that when they would normally be born to an extent, you know, and then they just have to have a little bit more monitoring, a little bit more hands-on activity in the NICU, as opposed to like the standard nursery from a standard birth, if you can even call it that. So breaking the bones of 7 black babies in the NICU is the most heinous you can get. Those babies are already under duress. Imagine that though. A baby can't respond, can't protect itself, can't articulate. They just crying for any old thing. These babies are crying because they were being hurt. That's disgusting, man. Disgusting. And they put her back on the floor. Let's see what else you got to say.
It resonates with me pretty hardcore. It's also why I was so interested in going into health law when I was a little girl. I've told y'all that I grew up pretty sick. From the age of 2, I was constantly in the hospital, damn near grew up there. And I have seen so many racist practices firsthand in the healthcare system. And so I just want to remind you that when we talk about black maternal and infant mortality, at the core of it is racist practices within healthcare.
Yo, I'm gonna tell you, right? So as a business owner myself, there's times where I deploy guys on jobs that I knew I had to get rid of, right? But I didn't have the luxury or the opportunity at that time. There was so much work that had to be done, and I had to allocate resources based on what I had, or lack thereof. So guys that were inept, at a deficit, didn't listen, were uncoachable, untrainable, wanted to do their own thing, I had to put them out there. I had a slight luxury of being able to go with them, or at the very least stop by different jobs to try to maintain a level of integrity and quality of work, even with these sorry ass guys. But I was between a rock and a hard place. And so I would just put them out there anyway, But my company does move management. These are kids, these are babies, right? And maybe that was an allegation, and so whomever was the supervisor put them back out there. But people get so desensitized that I don't even know how that makes sense. Were they like short staffed, understaffed, where there are no travel nurses? Because think about that. You hurting babies and they still put you back on the floor is the nastiest, most profane shit I heard in the last couple of days. Everybody need to be implicated. Okay, sue, I get it, right? But the suing is just that civil about the money. You literally hurting people, hurting babies, no less. Everybody got to go. Everybody got to get cuffed. Everybody got to get charged. Let's see.
Like Lex said in this video, what nursing is to a lot of white women is what policing is to a lot of white men. And at the core of the issues that we have and how black people are treated in both systems, it's racism.
So after
when you now that part is tough, right? One or two bad apples spoiled a bunch. It seems to be the allegation is that is overwhelmingly happening, right? I've never heard of an incident like this before, unless I'm just missing it. So I need to hear more about, what's happening, where the percentages are. One is enough, no question, right? I don't want to blanket it though, because I have 6 kids. We had several white nurses and things of that nature. Bunch of black nurses, especially living in the area we're in, but several white nurses, and generally speaking, they all were phenomenal, But this is what happens, man. Stereotypes will cast a aspersion across the diaspora of a people, period. We see it all the time as black people, we all violent, we all out here shooting, stabbing, robbing, right? When you look at the actual stat, it's 10,000 black people compared to 42, 45 or 6 million black people that actually live in the country. But when you look at the violent crime stats that we overrepresent in, upwards of 30%, it's 10,000 black people doing the crime. But we all now have to carry that negative mantra on us because of the actions of a few. But in the crime demographic itself, we overrepresent. So when you take criminals, now when you start talking about the criminal demographic, that's the key, right? So we can't dismiss it because the number is nominal, because when you start talking about criminals only, the number is astronomical.
seeing something like that, I posted it on social. I couldn't wait to amplify this because so many people needed to see it and hear about it. The one thing I was looking for was confirmation of the racial angle to these crimes, confirmed by some of the news sources that cover this kind of thing, or any news sources for that matter. And it never came. That's why we're a week later. I kept seeing content that mentioned that they were black babies, but none of these articles and media would mention that there were black babies. Now, I do understand that.
So where was the information about black babies obtained from specifically? Maybe he'll tell us.
When you have victims that are minors, then there's some privacy that comes into play. And certainly when it comes by some of the news sources that cover this kind of thing, or any news sources for that matter, and it never came. That's why we're a week later. I kept seeing content that mentioned that they were black babies, but none of these articles and media would mention that there were black babies. Now, I do understand that when you have victims that are minors, then there's some privacy that comes into play. And certainly when it comes to things that happen in a hospital, there's some privacy that comes into play. And I certainly respect that. I also will acknowledge that it gives you a certain amount of cover in a case like this when that kind of crime is alleged. But ultimately, I decided that it was too important to not say something for a couple of reasons. One, we know that racism is very much still alive. How could we possibly come out of 2024 without having to accept that fact?
Greeting, David. You've been selected to pick cotton at the nearest plantation in Atlanta. Be ready at 12 a.m. sharp with your belongings.
David Williams reads the alarming text message he received after.
I think I remember this. Okay, I think I remember this. So I think he's putting this clip in to prove or substantiate the point that racism still exists, you know? And I think everybody admits, for the most part, that racism exists. I think people are inherently racist, right? Because people, even when people marry, right, they tend to stay within their race overwhelmingly. People have a natural disposition to pick and be around their own people. Of course, there's outliers, but generally speaking, majority of people do. Several communities, you have them. Chinatown, you know, Little Italy, Koreatown, right? Where oftentimes people commune together, you know, just because when we assess the suffix ist, it means have an interest in or pertaining to, right? So when people are pianists, gymnasts, right, they have an affinity for such a thing, and therefore they are attracted to it. And so when we look at the term racist, although I know that the definition is different, it has a different connotation. Generally speaking, people prefer their own. You know, I think when we start talking about racism and systemic oppressions, those are the things that people like to argue the most.
After the election,
Master Ben asked us to send out this text message. Please be ready, and we won't be whipped. And I replied back, well, you better tell Ben I'm not my ancestors. I whip and shoot back.
And this is one arena where black people are extremely vulnerable when it comes to the infiltration of racists into these spaces. They were right to make the connection to police officers in the video I played at the outset. So this is something that we all need to deal with. Now, as far as the facts,
in terms of the police, man, if you have conduct that is unbecoming and poor, and then you couple that with the amount of police presence in a given area, you're going to have the arrests and things of that nature. But we can't gloss over the fact that people are conducting themselves inappropriately and therefore being arrested because of it. You know, again, it's a small number out of the very large pool of 45 or 46 million. I forget the actual stat, you know, but when we assess that demographic, we have to be honest about the unbecoming conduct. But we don't all want to take on that cloud or that mantra. And so I think the key here is when we start talking about police and black people being arrested, the people that aren't doing anything wrong need to make sure we get rid of some of them stupid ass tropes that we got. Stop snitching and all this stuff, right? If you are a normal citizen and you see a crime happening, you're not a part of that. You're not a part of that construct. You're not a gangster. You're not a thug. You ain't hood. Protect your community. We uphold these standards that make no sense and don't get us any further. We praise foolishness far too often. Our best movies are gangsters and drug dealers. New Jack City, Boys in the Hood, Paid in Full, Sugar Hill. That's the things that we continue to put on high and wonder why we can't get out of this rut as a whole.
of the case, they all read about like this. Newborn babies at a Virginia hospital have been suffering mysterious injuries. A nurse now faces abuse charges. Dominique Hackey was waiting to cradle his preemie son for the first time when a nurse delivered devastating news. The newborn's left leg was fractured. In an instant, Hackey's world shattered. His wife had just been discharged after giving birth to fraternal twins, Micah and Noah. The boys, born in September of 2023 at Henrico Doctors Hospital in Richmond, Virginia, are the couple's first children. Because they were born at 28 weeks and weighed only about 2 and 3 pounds respectively, the twins had remained in the neonatal intensive care unit, with Micah barely hanging on. And now, 7 days after birth, the healthier twin's leg was bruised and broken, he said. I was confused and heartbroken. I'm a first-time parent. I have no background in the medical field. You're telling me my baby has a fracture. How did it happen? They had been scanned before, and they'd have said something if anything had popped up at that time. Out of fear he would be blamed for that injury, the 33-year-old Hackey said he turned down the offer to hold his son that day.
That's disheartening for that man. And they actually scan him. My son specifically had a CAT scan done just because of how he was born. I'm gonna tell you though, especially in the NICU, the overwatch of those kids is tremendous. Now, every hospital is different, but they should have decently standardized practices. Babies are born, it's like a war zone to try to get them out at times. You know, whether they pulling them, trying to get the canal open, even with the cesarean, the doctors be going hard in terms of cutting, moving, getting the baby out, especially under duress and things of that nature. And the babies come out like none of my kids ever had any like fractures. You'll see like a little bit of bruising, right? Because they have to pull them to an extent. But that's intentional. That's intentional, especially if it was a leg. And now they didn't tell us if the babies were breached or anything, how they were born in terms of cesarean. But if they were born naturally, then it means they come out head first, right? So at the very least, if you were pulling on that baby to get him out, him in this case, right, it definitely wouldn't be his legs. That's what makes this even more egregious and disgusting. Just based on the standardized birth. And I'm assuming that the babies were pushed. I'm not sure. They didn't tell us. Maybe they'll clarify. But yo, the father didn't even want to hold his kid for fear of persecution. Think about that. Think about that mindset.
Now, as many aspects of this are so infuriating and quite frankly disgusting, I'm just imagining making the choice not to hold your son for fear that you would be blamed. You already have to process your son.
That's crazy. I mean, we on the same page with that. Point blank period, man. Point blank period.
Go just about anything. More than a year later, Hackey and other parents may now be closer to understanding what happened in the hospital, which has reported a series of mysterious injuries to newborns over the past several years. Police last week arrested a former nurse at the hospital, Erin Elizabeth Ann Stroman, and charged her with malicious wounding and felony child abuse in a November.
It's the goddamn devil, right? We've seen so many times in a court of public opinion that it don't matter if you've been found guilty or what, right? So, since allegations are enough seemingly for everything else, this is the goddamn devil you're looking at right here.
24 incident involving another newborn. Investigators are now looking into a total of 7 potential.
Think about this, bro. You in there hurting kids. 7 kids total. This is a 187. Ain't no way. Ain't no way.
sexual abuse cases at the hospital, 3 in 2024, 4 in 2023, including Noah's, said Shannon Taylor, the Commonwealth's attorney for Henrico County. In a statement last week, Henrico Doctors Hospital said it was shocked and saddened by the nurse's arrest and is assisting Henrico police in their investigation. At this time, we're not admitting new patients to our NICU. For babies needing NICU care, we'll assess them, stabilize, and facilitate a transfer to an appropriate facility once available. I could not stop the tears from flowing. I have a lot of guilt, a lot of regret, and a lot of anger that the hospital let it get this far, that we have all these parents whose children were affected, he told CNN. My son was one of her first victims. My son's first emotion was pain, and as a father, that breaks me. One more time. I have a lot of guilt. I have a lot of guilt, says the father of the son that was allegedly abused at the hospital that they entrusted to take care of him. He feels guilt.
So let me tell y'all a story, right? My son, I have 2 sets of twins. So my second set of twins was being born. So this process was not as smooth as the first, and they're already twins. It's already high risk pregnancy. So when the twins are being born, we go into the ICU, intensive care unit. And so there's a lot more equipment just in case things go awry. Each twin has its own team of people, meaning it's like 12 people for one child, 12 people for the other. So the room is packed. We went to the same hospital as we did previously. And even though in our rotation, we have a female black doctor, OBGYN, to deliver the babies. But, they're on a rotation. So when you firstly get admitted, she was on the clock. But after 12 hours, the doctors shift. Now, it's the same 3 or 4 doctors in their rotation. So we were familiar with all the doctors. They were the same as the ones previously, 15 months beforehand. Right. So they're already close together in terms of the kids. It's 2 sets of twins that are fraternal. It's 2 different sacs, 2 different eggs. So when it was actually time to go, we had the same male doctor. He did a good job the first time, a white guy. Her epidural wasn't taken though this time, She was getting the burning sensation where the medicine's not going where it's supposed to go. She wasn't numbing as well like the first time with the first set of twins. So we get in there, they're still trying to do the epidural while we're in the ICU. Mind you, while we're in the ICU, we're still trying to get the epidural to take. So the pain threshold is different, much different this time. My daughter comes out first. She's in the birth canal for 2 hours, pushing for 2 hours straight. Pushing. Rocky finally comes out. Her head is even elongated because of how long she was in the birth canal. She came out. She didn't cry at first. They had to get her going, right? They had to get her going. She had to be intubated, but Rocky comes out. She's good, right? Essentially. So my son, he's second to come out, right? Now, mind you, we're already in the ICU. This is already high risk. The twins are being born 15 months apart. But he's breached, mind you. So that means his feet are first. Okay. Heart rate going up and down. She lost, losing blood just naturally, like going through these processes. Her epidural's not taken. But they want to try some shit though. Right? It's unprecedented to have 2 twins, 2 sets of twins, born 15 months apart, same doctor doing the delivery. One twin, and so my first 2 daughters were born naturally. She pushed both of them. My third daughter of the 2 sets of twins, she pushed her out naturally. So now this is unprecedented. But my son is breached, feet first. And so she's pushing him, and we're at, what, can you do this? Are you sure? Yeah, we do breach all the time. But breach is not recommended, especially with everything that's involved, But when it's a black woman sitting there, this is my thoughts in hindsight. It's like the care is less, right? It was almost like a trial. Like they were okay with trying it on her, you know. And so I'm having several thoughts. I'm telling her beforehand, yo, just get the cesarean because everything isn't going as smoothly. But I'm not being as pushy just because when you're in these circumstances, right? I'm sitting there kind of waiting and seeing, you know, but I ask clarifying questions and I'm pretty direct with the doctors when you hear something that's bullshit. And I'm like, so why would you do? But my wife was adamant about not getting cut, right? And I could have pushed it. I could have changed it, you know? But I said, okay, you there, you done this before. You saying that, okay, you could get it done, whatever. So my son is breached, try to get him out. He gets out about to his waist, you know? And I'm looking at the doctor's face because this guy, he had good disposition, you know, just from the first one, right? Even though we were there for the black doctor, the rotations, the baby's got to go, right? Is what it is. But I see his face start to change. His eyes start to kind of squint down, you know? And he getting worried now. And I'm like, okay, something not right. So Big Chug is stuck for upwards of 2 minutes. They had to call in, they call him like a gray hair, which means an older doctor who had more experience because our doctor couldn't get him out. They got a couple students. One guy was from Romania and he was there. He was already a doctor, but you know, he had to go through the program again coming over here. When I tell you, they like cranking on her stomach, pushing down, like he had his elbow trying to just force Big Chug out. But he was stuck. He wouldn't go and he's breached, right? So his like legs are out essentially, and that's it. But now he's in the birth canal. His head gets stuck because then his head is big. So now he's being suffocated. So the other doctor comes. They couldn't get him out. They had to cut her down there to try to get him out. Still wouldn't happen. Literally with scissors. They then had to push him back up. Then do the cesarean and pull him out. His heart stopped. He couldn't breathe for 2 minutes. He flatlined. There is no recommendation out there to say 2 sets of twins 15 months apart, deliver them both vaginally, but then the second set is delivered vaginally, but the epidural's not working, things aren't going smoothly, and he's breached. You don't even try that. But when I hear the disparities that are alleged regarding how black women are treated specifically in these situations, and given my situation, I saw it in real time. They wanted to be the first to do some shit, but you trying that with somebody's life, you know? And I felt helpless when they talking about the dad in this story. Because you're like, damn, we just was with y'all. Y'all held it down last time. The kids were beautifully taken care of, you know? And I'm feeling like something not right, something going on. And I'm asking the questions, but, you know, you're just unsure. And I'm pretty firm, direct, and aggressive regarding these things, you know? But just my wife said, nope, remember, we did this last time. I could do it. You know what I'm saying? And we did do it last time. And it was smooth for all intents and purposes, right? You got to push a long time, whatever the case is, you know? And this happened in front of my face. So I got kicked out, right? Because now they got to cut. Now it's surgery time. This is why we in the ICU. So they wheel my son out. You know, he got all this stuff all over him. All, you know, buttons and everything. They had to cool Chugga down to a hypothermic status because what it was found that when people are hypothermia, the brain function shuts down, which actually protects the brain. Because remember, he couldn't breathe. He wasn't breathing and he flatlined. And so he got an actual CAT scan, you know, which they don't do to a bunch of babies. But they assume that there could be some brain trauma because of him not having air for 2 minutes. Right? Your brain can't be deprived. So they cooled him for 2 days straight. And all I could think about was how guilty I felt. Because I was pushing, but I was trying to be as empathetic as possible. You know, I'm trying to understand it. Okay, we had these doctors before. Her doctor had came back and said, hey, it's good. She showed up at the hospital. We could do it, you know, just with the breech stuff they kept on telling us. I felt so guilty. Like I wanted to break something in there. Because if I would have pushed it harder, I could have helped Big Chug. I could have saved him from that trauma. That's all I could think about. Even to this day, to an extent. He's fine now, right? So it's cool. He didn't have any his brain was fine. The doctor was amazed. And now my sets of twins weren't as small, 2 pounds. My first daughters were 5 pounds. And these two were like 6.5 pounds. You know, and they made it 32 and 34 weeks, 36 weeks. She'll probably comment on it, you know? And I felt that, man. It hurt every single day going down there with him. And she couldn't go, of course, you know? She couldn't go, but it bothered the hell out of me. Like, yo, I'm your dad. This is my number one job. I will kill and die for you. And I failed in that moment, you know? She lost so much blood. She needed a blood transfusion. She was in the ICU. Now I'm mad. Now I'm like, listen, you can't do this. You can't do that. Don't give her nothing unless I'm in here. Because they had her on the anesthesia. Sir, I said, let me say, I failed downstairs. That's what I thought. I said, I will not fail up here. I promise you, it's not going to go how y'all think it's going to go. I don't want to get it there, right? But I'm already there now. So please don't give her nothing unless I'm sitting here, unless somebody call me, period. You know? And who knows how it would have really went, right? Thankfully, that was enough, you know? Her doctor was in tears. The white guy who did it, he running back and forth, checking on, he didn't go home, you know? So, but this is after the fact, though. Because they didn't see the value. That's how I perceived it. Why do this when we could just cut them out and call it a day? If you know it's already high risk and they're already twins. This is a quick Google, right? You heard my story. Black maternal mortality rate. That's what I Googled. Just want to understand. The maternal mortality rate for black women in 2022 was 49.5 deaths out of every 100,000 live births. This was significantly higher than the rate of white women, which was 19 deaths per 100,000 live births. 2021, the maternal mortality rate for black women in 2021 was 69.9 deaths per 100,000 live births. This was 2.6 times the rate of white women, which was 26.6 deaths per 100,000 births. This one is from the CDC. Right, which is oftentimes an accepted and reliable source. And these are numbers, right? Based on what's happening in the hospital at that given time. And when I tell you my story, because it's the same medicine, the same areas, the same standards, but what's up with the approach? Now, there's arguments to where the health or lack thereof of the patient themselves can be a cause. You know, I've heard the argument about obesity and things of that nature. So if you come in unhealthy when you're going through such a traumatic experience like pushing out a baby, a cesarean birth, and you have a predisposition for things that make these things more dangerous, like obesity, hypertension, this is the reason, right? But here's the thing. There's so many preventative measures. I just had shoulder surgery. They asked me every single question you can ask a person before you put them under a knife. Every single, do you have this? Do you have that? Do you have this? If so, you can't do X, Y, and Z. You know, there's so much happening. It's in a hospital. But double the deaths, 2.5 times the deaths. And then you Think back to my story. Let's see if we can do this. Let's try to achieve something that's unprecedented. But this is a person. There's something to it. There's something to it. You know, and my anecdotal experience can't be cast aside. But these are real numbers. And we're looking at racial bias. How much do we have to consider that when it comes to what we're looking at here on this page? And again, people will look and say, well, 49 out of 100,000. There was another number I heard where I think mortality for women is 15% of births. You know, so people say out of 100,000, 50 deaths, it's nominal. When you look at volume, okay, but we're talking about people, right? So immediately it has to matter more. But just like we had the conversation about the criminal element, when we're looking at women birthing children, the disparity is egregious. I think Asian Americans had like the least amount. I think it was like 13 every 100,000. But when you look inside of this demographic, when you're looking at statistics, consider the demographic. But we have to make a concession about the criminal element. Here, there's something that's not right. Scrutiny. And imagine if I wasn't there, at the very least, asking different questions, being a presence. Even though I could have pushed it more, asking clarifying questions, getting an argument with the doctor, getting an argument with the wife even. Listen, push it. I remember I did it last time. This time is different though, babe. Right? But I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to be empathetic. I'm not the one on the table. But fellas, point blank period don't matter. And there's several things that I succeeded on in there. You know, her needle didn't take when they were trying to do the blood transfusion. They try to put us in a certain room. You know, they try to put us here, there, you know. I'm like, nope, we're not doing this, not doing that, not doing this. But when it came to the babies, I could have pushed a little bit harder in terms of the birthing. But she just did it 15 months before. She had the confidence that she could do it again. You know? But the doctors, he's breached. He's a twin, 15 months apart. The experts make the decision, push the decision that's the right one, not the one that you think's gonna put you in the history books because you're dealing with people's lives. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. Be safe and do the right thing, man. Like, share, subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And I'm out.